This Strider is strong.
Hey, greetings programs, it's BC from Alloy 7 Video with my review for Strider for the PlayStation 4. It also exists out there on PC, but I played the PS4 version. I like to start these reviews off with the bottom line up front, so I'm just going to come out and say it. Avoid this game unless you can get it for $5 or cheaper, or just avoid it altogether. I didn't have much of a good time with Strider for the PlayStation 4. We'll get into the reasons why here in the review, but I love to start these things off with the bottom line, get my bias out of the way, and then we can get into the more objective, granular parts of the review. So without further ado, Double Helix decides to employ a Metroidvania for this particular edition of Strider, something that I think is a great idea because I love the Metroid games from back in the day. Don't really love many of the Castlevanias that followed that model, but did love Metroid and Super Metroid. And while Strider is moderately enjoyable, I'm not saying the game is completely garbage. It is moderately enjoyable, but for most of the experience, it won't capture that level of awesomeness that Metroid or Super Metroid were able to do. It's a solid action game, but not one that you'll probably remember long after it's over. So my bias aside, that bottom line aside, let's jump into the categories of gamers and see how you all may fare if you do decide to play this game. Action junkies. For those that don't know, this Strider, this PS4 and PC version of Strider, is an action platformer that reimagines the original arcade game from 1989 that has the same name. In this case, the developers, as I said earlier, decided to employ a more open approach or Metroidvania approach, thus removing the level structure of the original and adding several new options for executing your enemies. For the most part, the combat is intuitive and easy to master. You should moderately enjoy the varied enemy types that encourage and sometimes even force you to attack in ways that go beyond simply mashing the attack button. You'll also find several support items, including roving shields, throwing stars, a warping ability that reflects enemy projectiles, and even a mythical panther that you can summon to attack your enemies, and one that will help you traverse later parts of the game's map. My favorite part of Strider, if we want to talk about the good side of the game, was battling the plethora of enemy bosses and mini-bosses the game seems to continuously throw at you. Instead of forcing you down its corridors to battle minion after minion, Strider rewards the player with boss encounters that require you to apply the skills you've acquired during the course of the game. Aside from a handful of bosses with cheap attacks toward the end of the game, I also believe that Double Helix, in this case, got the increase in difficulty across the length of the game just about right. Quick side note, the physics for controlling Strider are less than perfect, as he's prone to grapple onto things even when you're not trying to grapple. This is especially annoying in boss fights that require platforming. I also found it tough to ensure Strider was facing the right direction after jumps during the second to last boss in the game. Explorers. The world map does allow for and even encourage exploration, which will allow you to find health and magic power upgrades. However, my first gripe with the game's approach lies in its pacing. Traversing much of the map is limited by doors you cannot open without first learning the abilities that allow you to open said doors. Now, that shouldn't sound strange if you've played Metroid or games like Shadow Complex in the past, but where Strider doesn't quite answer the mail is in how long it takes you to find the skills necessary to open these doors. I believe this formula is more enjoyable when you get the abilities earlier in the game and then are set free to explore the more difficult areas at your leisure. This isn't a huge issue, but it's usually one that sets apart the great Metroid clones from the ones that are just okay. I would definitely throw Strider in the just okay bracket for the purposes of this review. Also, keep in mind that there are some slightly tricky platforming parts later in the game. Some even go as far as to alter gravity, thus making controlling Strider more challenging or annoying if you're like me. None of these areas are ultimately difficult, but they are slightly annoying, as I said, for me, as I typically like to just explore, find hidden loot, and beat up bad guys. Achievers. On top of the semi-sharp combat and slightly encumbered exploration, Strider will also treat you to trophies or achievements that are mostly enjoyable to acquire. Completionists will also be mildly pleased at all the hidden upgrades one can find by being willing to scour the game's map. Audio files and visual lists. I'm going to combine you two for the purposes of this review, as both of these sections are very short and sweet. Visuals were very clearly made for last gen and then just plussed up with some texturing and color enhancements to make them shine on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Audio is nostalgic at times, but mostly non-existent for most of the game. I think the lack of compelling sound also pulls one out of the experience, whereas games like Metroid use music to properly set the mood for different areas of the world. Bookworms. I wouldn't typically put this section in a review for an action platformer, but for some strange reason Capcom felt it necessary to force an absolutely corny voice-acted story over this adventure. It comes off contrived and will probably often annoy you, as the dialogue scenes are usually set before boss battles that if you lose, you'll have to watch several times, as you cannot skip the scenes right away even if you've seen them already. Okay, so to finish this review up, Strider can be a moderately fun game if straightforward action platforming is your thing. Strider is ultimately longer than it is fun and really does nothing to bring anything to the table that you've probably not already seen. Keep in mind that I received Strider for free through the PlayStation Plus program. I personally wouldn't recommend that anyone spend $15 to play this. If you're dying to play it, just wait for a Steam sale or hope that PlayStation Plus will give it away for free at some point again in the future. And that's all I have, friends. I hope that you found this review informative. I know it was a little bit late to the party, but for those of you who are on the fence like me, hopefully I've saved you $15 or at least $10 if you listen to me and wait for a sale if you're just dying to play it. Anyways, I hope that you will subscribe. I hope that you will like. If you hated it, then hit dislike. It's all good. I just appreciate any feedback that you can give me. If you've played the game, leave me your thoughts in the comments section. Until next time, friends, until all are one, this is BC, the Brain Supreme here at Alloy 7 Video signing off. Allow me to tell all of you peace and Godspeed.
Alloy.